Hey everybody, welcome back to class. So far, we've created a C++ class, printed messages to the screen, created and exposed variables to Unreal and blueprints. Now we're going to make our game think. We're going to use if statements. If you use blueprints, this is the same as the branch node. Remember we held B and left clicked to bring it up? In blueprints, a branch asks a question. Is whatever is coming or being fed in true or false? If it's true, we want to go one way. If it's false, we would go another way. In C++, this does the exact same thing using something called an if statement. All right, here we are in Visual Studio. Let's take a look at how we can use an if statement to determine whether or not we want to print the score to the screen. And what we'll do is we'll say, you know what, we'll modify this line. And what we'll say is, hey, if score is greater than 50, then we'll print you win. All right, so the first thing we want to do is figure out where is the code that we want to check or we want to determine should run if our statement is true. And that's this whole section here. We want to print to the screen, you win, if our score is greater than 50. So the way that you start off an if statement is you just start off by typing if. And then we want to have a open and close parentheses. And within this is our parameters that we're going to check. Before we do that, we want to designate the section of code that we'd like to run if our statement is true. So we do that with an open and closed curly braces. So I'm going to press enter a few times. I'm going to highlight the text from 26 all the way to 31, making sure to grab all of it. And I'm going to hold the Alt key down and push the up arrow. And I'm going to make sure that all of this code is inside of my if statement. Now I'm going to teach you a pretty nifty hotkey for reformatting our code here, because right now you can see it's all lined up and it doesn't read that great. So I'm just going to select everything from score all the way down to this curly brace here, so essentially from line 19 to 33. I'm going to hold Control and hit K and then D, and you'll notice that it reformatted this for easy readability. Okay, now we have a little error here, and if I highlight over this, it says expected expression. So this is what I was talking about. It's expecting some sort of parameter or some sort of information to tell it whether or not it should run this code. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to write score, which signifies this variable here, and say, hey, if this score is greater than 50, we're going to run this code. So I'm just going to hit Control S to save this. And let's go back into Unreal. All right, here we are in Unreal, and I have my first actor selected. And I'm going to set my score to 100. And I'm going to press play. Now it says score equals 100. What happened? Why are we not getting you win? Well, we haven't modified that text yet. So let's go back to Visual Studio and set that up. Now I might want to use this line of code again later, so I'm just going to put 2 forward slashes there, and that's just a comment. And then I'm going to press enter here, and I'm going to copy, just to save time, text, and then everything in between these parentheses here. And I'm going to copy that, and I'm just going to paste it here. And instead of score %D, I'm just going to type you win, exclamation point. So take a really good look here. If you see any red lines or errors on your code, make sure that your code looks exactly like mine. It's very easy to kind of do something off or have a space or forget one of these lines or something to, that would cause an error. All right, so let's go back to Unreal and see if you win prints. So I'm going to save this. All right, here we are back in Unreal. I'm going to press play. It says score equals 100. Again, why isn't it saying you win? Well, I did this on purpose to remind you that you always have to sort of compile your code if your code isn't compiling fast enough. So I'm going to go ahead and click compile, and I'm going to pause the video and then unpause it once it says that my code has compiled successfully. All right, now my Unreal project just finished compiling. I'll press play, and you can see you win. So I'll hit stop here, and I'll change this to 49. And I'll press play, and you can see nothing happens. Well, what if I want to check if if it's less than 50, and I want it to print something like keep trying? Well, let's go back to Visual Studio and set that up. All right, so what we can do here is, in order to check if our score, see right now we have, it was actually score is greater than 50 is what we had before. Let me save that. What I can do is I want to make sure that I am sort of not messing with or playing around with anything that goes inside of these curly braces here, right? And I also want to be very conscious of this curly brace here. This is where a lot of students kind of get formatting issues, and that's why they provide these dotted lines to help you out. So right behind this one, so on line 31 for me to line 32, I'm going to type else if, open close parentheses, hit enter, and then open close curly braces. Now, I'm getting an error here for the same one that we got before because we don't have any parameters. So let's go ahead and copy our score is greater than 50 here. And let's say if our score is less than 50, what do we want to do? Well, I'm going to copy the code from line 30 all the way down to 31, up to that semicolon, and I'm going to paste it in here. And let me zoom out just a little bit here, give you some space. Let me close this out as well. All this stuff, just so you can kind of see that code. Sorry, I know this is a kind of a laptop. This can get kind of tiny. So we have, instead of this text you win, what I can write in here is I can say, hey, you know, like greater, and then this could just be less, just to kind of quickly get this. Now I want to show you something else. If live coding is giving you a little bit of a headache and you have to constantly restart and do all that stuff, let me show you sort of an alternative way, which I might use for the rest of this video because I think some folks might be having issues building using live coding. So let's jump back into Unreal and turn live coding off first. All right, go up to Edit at the top, and then your Editor Preferences here. And then under this General tab, look for this live coding, and then just turn off Enable Live Coding. You might have to restart. And then let's close this up. And then let's jump back into Visual Studio, and then let's do a quick build. All right, so here we are in Visual Studio, and what I want to do is with live coding off, and like I said, you might have to restart at this point. And let's see, I haven't restarted. Let's see if it gives me an error. Go to your Games tab here, and then right-click, and then just go to Build. And with live coding off, we should get down at the bottom here in our output, a build 1 succeeded, 0 failed. And now let's go back to Unreal and let's test if our score, if I make it greater than 50, if it says greater, if I make it less than 50, it says less. So let's save this, Control S. I mean, it should have been saved when we built. Yeah, let's be sure. And yeah. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and select my my first actor here. And you can see we have a score of 51. So I'm going to go ahead and press play. You can see it says greater. And then let's go ahead and make this 33. Let's go ahead and press play. And it says less. Let's go ahead and add an additional switch so that, you know, like a branch essentially to our code back in Visual Studio. All right, so what I want to do is kind of make these a little more exact because I'd like to add the a final statement, which is my else statement. So what an else statement is, or does rather, is it does something similar to these, but you'll notice the body of an else statement, and make sure here that on 44 we hit enter, and then we create our opening curly braces first, is there is no, there are no parameters after the else statement. What it does is if your if statement it doesn't come true, it jumps to our else if statement. Now we could stack these else ifs. We can have multiple else ifs. Now if neither of these are true, the else kicks in. So what I want to do is just copy the body here of the from line 35 for me all the way to 42 at the semicolon. I'm going to hit Control C here, and I'm going to hit enter and paste it. Now a lot of my students, they end up reaching out to me for help because they're not sure why they're getting errors in their code after it was working, and the reason for that is usually it's just formatting issues. So what I'd like to do is just write hello from else here. And I'm going to save this, but I want to modify my parameters here. So I'm going to say here, if score is the same as 50, we're going to write 50 here. And then if my score is the same as maybe 10, we're going to write 10 here. Now, it's important to understand that there's different types of parameters, and I'll throw up a chart in a little bit that goes through all the different types and just sort of explain it. But you can write things like if score is not equal to 10, and this will pretty much print anything if it isn't 10. right? Or you could say if score is greater than or equal to 10, and this will say, well, anything greater than 10 or equal to 10, this will print. So that will pretty much be any number greater than 10, right? Or less than or equal to 10. Well, it's equal to 10 or less. So just be aware of these different types of operators that we can use. You could use it for health or whatever. So I'm going to right click here, do a quick build. Hopefully it builds quickly. And actually, I'm pretty impressed at how quickly my computer is building, considering that this is a fairly older computer at this point. It's about 6 or 7 years old. So I think Unreal maybe, and I think they're always modifying their build settings to make it a little bit cleaner. In the old days, it used to take us a lot longer. I mean, I would build a game for 45 minutes and go talk to my friends at the studio while it waited. All right, let's jump back in Unreal here. All right, here we are back in Unreal. I'm going to press play, and we get hello from else. Okay, that's not what we wanted, but let's try this again. So I'm going to make this a 10. I'm going to press play, and we get 10 there. And I'm going to press 50 here. And then we get 50. And now it should do that hello from else when I do a -5. So it is actually what we wanted. I wanted to start off with the 10 and 50. So it just happened to be a different number. All right, to really help us understand the way that our branching works, let's take a look at this chart here. Now, at first, we have the most basic of if statements. If the condition is true, the code inside the brackets run. If it's false, the code is skipped. When you only need to do something if a specific condition is met, like checking if the player has walked into a trigger volume, is when we would use this. Next, we add an else to our if. And if the condition is true in this parameter, code A runs, which is our first if statement. But if it's false, code B runs instead. You're choosing between the two options. Now, when we would use this is when there's two possible outcomes. For example, if the player is alive, let them move. Else, if they're dead, show them, the game over screen. I know it's a little bit morbid, but, pretty direct example. Then we have our if, else. So if you need more than two choices, you use an else if. Unreal will check each condition from top to bottom and run the first one that's true. If none are true, the else blocks runs. So when we would use this is, say you have 3 or more possibilities. Imagine checking a player's rank. If a player's points are 100, else if the points are 50, the else, maybe we give them, like a gold, silver, or bronze star. Next, we have the nested if. Now, this one, the inner nested if only runs if the outer is true. And this is great for situations where one checks only matters if another one is already passed. When we would use this is when a condition depends entirely on a previous one. For example, if the player presses the open button, then inside of that, they check if they actually have the key. Now, you can combine these conditions using operators like and or you can do the not one, which we talked about earlier, and that reverses the result. So we use these to make complex decisions in line. You might check if a player has high health and a specific weapon. So overall, we didn't cover all of these conditions, but we will eventually as we code. And as you code your own games, you're going to run into these a lot. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video.